Hello, algebra. Let's review chapter 11. Chapter 11. So as we go through this, you're going to set a timer. You're going to pause the video, work on the problems, and then check your answers. So here we go. So I would like you to set a timer for 5 minutes. You should be able to get both these problems done in 5 minutes. If you need 6, okay, but set a timer for 5 minutes and see if you can get them done in 5 minutes. This is Pythagorean theorem. So remember, that is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So I will give you that, and I would like you to use your notes to solve these two problems. Pause the video now. Okay, as you went through this problem, number 1, you should have got an approximated answer. You should have got a decimal, okay? So first you identified what your A, B, and C were. C is what you're looking for. So we are putting our C squared all the way down. So I've got my 11 squared plus 34 squared, filled that in and took care of that, squared those, and then I got to C squared equals 1277. When I look at that, I now need to undo that square. How do I do that? I take the square root of both sides. And when I square this will cancel and I'll get C by itself. When I take the square root of this, using my calculator, I am going to get a decimal. We aren't going to write this in standard radical form when we're doing Pythagorean's theorem. Instead, we're going to do a decimal. Okay, what about that second one? As I am looking through that, you should have got that you did not know b squared, so you were looking through and getting b squared. So you substituted your 12 in for A, your 20 in for C, solved accordingly, and again, you got to this point where you had x squared equals 256. I've got to cancel my x squared. To do that, I have to square root both sides. I get x by itself. And the square root of 256 is 16. I do that on my calculator. Okay, excellent. I would like you to set a timer for 10 minutes and do problems 3, 4, and 5. Make sure you do all of the problems, then come back and look at the explanation. So please pause the video now. Okay, for number 3, you should have got the answer of 15 times the square root of 2. You had to break both these numbers down before you could decide if you could add them together. If you take the perfect square of 162, it's 81. So the square root of 81 times 2, square root of 2, gives me 9 times the square root of 2. If you did the factor tree, you had a whole lot of 3's. You had a whole lot of 3's that you added together, or that you bunched together to get your 9 out. Okay? Same thing over here. 72 is the master product, or perfect square 36 times the square root of 2. I can take my 6 out because that's a perfect square. My square root of 2 stays underneath. Now I can add them together to get 15. Okay, number 4 we've done before. We may have actually done the exact problem before. We distribute by 2 in, so I get 2 squared and the square root of 5 squared. So each of these first steps are exactly the same. So there's 2 ways you can do this. If you remember that a square cancels a square root, you can skip to 4 times 5 and get 20. If not, that's all right. Then you would get 4 times the square root of 25, and we know the square root of 25 is 5, so we get 4 times 5 is 20. Okay? Number 5, you multiply first, you get the square root of 100, you look at your perfect square chart, you go, all right, that's 10. Fantastic. Okay, our next three problems. 6, 7, and 8, I would like you to set a timer for 12 minutes. You're going to solve these equations. After you solve the equations, you're going to have an answer. You need to solve well using good problem-solving skills from Chapter 2, along with what we've learned in this chapter. So take your time and undo this well. 4 minutes each problem. You should be okay. Take your time. Think about what you're doing. Pause the video now. Okay, on this, you should have isolated the radical by getting rid of the 5. You need to move the 5 over here by the 2 so that all the numbers outside of the radical sign were together. So you got x plus 3 equals 7. Now, I have to undo this radical. So I need to square this side. If I square this side, I square this side. This will cancel. So I get x plus 3 equals 49 when I square 7. I have to subtract 3 to both sides, and I get x equals 46. Okay, the next problem was already all isolated. So all I had to do was square both sides. So that undid my square. So I get x minus 1 equals 9. Add 1 to both sides, x equals 10. Next, I've got my radical sign over here. 18 is outside of it, so I need to move it to isolate my radical. Subtract 18 off on both sides. Probably should have zeroed that out. Okay, so I get the radical of 6. Whoa. Radical of x equals 6. And when I take and get rid of my radical sign, by squaring both sides, I get x equals 36, which is my answer. Didn't need that. Okay. Questions? Ask your classmates and go from there. We've got 2 problems left. We're using Pythagorean's theorem again. We're deciding, is this a right triangle? Is this a right triangle? So please set a timer for 5 minutes each. Remember, you're using a squared plus b squared equals c squared, and it matters what number goes into c squared. It doesn't matter about a squared or b squared, but it does matter for c squared. Pause the video now and do 9 and 10. Okay, algebra. You should have got the answer no here. If you had plugged your numbers in correctly, A and B would have been 24 and 26. C has to be 30 because 30 is the largest of the 3 numbers. So then I work down, remember? 24 squared is 576. 26 squared is 676. Add those together to get 732. That's not right. Whew, told you it wasn't right. 1252, that adds to. But if you do 30 squared is 900, and 1252 is not equal to 900, so therefore, this is not a right triangle. It's got 3 sides, but it's not a right triangle. It is a triangle, no 90-degree angle. Okay, last problem. We've got a squared, b squared, c squared. You have to pick the biggest number for c. If all of you have 25 here because it was the second number, you have the wrong answer. 25 has to be your c. Has to be your c because it's the largest number of the 3. 7 squared is 49. 24 squared is still 576. And I add those together, I get 625. And when I square 25, I get the same thing. They match, so my answer is yes, this would be a right triangle. Make sure that when you're adding this together, you're not putting your answer over here. You're working down on one side and down on one side. All right, God bless. Be ready for your test.